Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you all the audiences and our educators to give me this chance to stay here and present my speeches to you. Today, our topic, our motion, is about national legislative bodies should reserve at least 50% of the delegate seats for women. Our interpretation of this motion is that national legislative bodies, as the basic functional departments for human rights, should preserve that human rights or equality to be made sure. So our definition of this motion is that each gender, as the God divided us into two parts, the female parts and our male parts, should have the same share of all the rights in society. In our following speech, I'd like to give two main points of our arguments. In the following, I would like to make a quick summary of all I've said. Now let's begin. On the very first page, as I have mentioned before, if there were only two people on our nation, how would the legislative bodies form? Of course, we too are the only members of the legislative bodies. But why? Let's take a look at how the national legislative bodies work and why it exists. Legislation is made to make sure that society functions smoothly, to make sure that everybody's right is preserved. As a result, human rights of equality, the basic human rights, should be manifested the most. It is well written in the American Constitution on the first page that every man are born equal, and we interpreted that men is not all about male. It's also about female. We can see that there are a lot of guys sitting here, and also there are a lot of women sitting here. And I should understand that all of you will agree with me that both of the genders have the same rights in society. In our society, however, because of the long evolved evolution of society, women somehow become a comparatively weaker part of all the people in this world. That is certainly true in every single country, every single nation of this world. We don't want to say how it forms, but that is the truth. So it is within our right, within our limitation, to make sure that this weaker part of all the humans have their share, have their fair share to speak their point. At this time, please. So, human rights, the basic needs, must be preserved. The second point we like to present to you is that only with this kind of means, that males and females at least share the fair part of the national legislative bodies, can we make sure that the national legislative bodies hold the fair views of our civilians to fully represent the society. After all, the members of the parliaments, the members of the House of Representatives, are to represent our profit. To fully represent this, we need female and male, the main and only parts of our population, to have the same right, to have the same share in the society, and also in the legislative bodies. Please.
if you mean that the equal number of the two sexes in this legislative bodies mean that they are actually equal. So how do you explain that there are actually two male debaters in your proposition one side, and do you mean that the girls' rights in your school have been violated?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to answer that in a quick form. That is, in our debate, you are not here to represent any preference of the humans. Do you understand? Maybe there are 5 girls and only 3 guys here, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the same rights. But in legislative bodies, they must represent all the members of our society. And the only means of this is to make sure that every gender shares the same number of seats. That is simply the truth. And to fully represent the society, as I have mentioned before, the makeup of our society. Females and males have certain roles, have certain gender roles in the society. For example, some jobs are maintained mainly by males, and some jobs are maintained mainly by females. Just like take nurse as an example. As we all know, nurses are mostly female jobs. So if there are less females in the legislative bodies, how should nurses' rights to be fully represented? How should this be possible? I don't know if there is a better means of doing this. So as a result, we must make sure that women and men share the same number of seats in our legislative bodies, in order to make sure that every legislation we make fully represents the society, fully represents our as citizens' rights. So to sum up, we give you mainly 2 points to support our ideas. The first is about human rights. Human rights as a basic needs for everybody, every citizen, must be preserved. And the second one is, this means should fully represent the society, because different gender have different gender roles. Consequently, we support that national legislative bodies should preserve at least 50% of delegate seats for women. Thank you.
Okay, I thank the Prime Minister for his speech and invite the Leader of Opposition to take the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My speech falls into 2 parts. First part is rebuttal part, and the second part is my constructive speech. The proposition, the Prime Minister talked about equality, and you talk about equality, and I will talk about it. You said that the women are weaker part. Why do you think we are the weaker part? Why do you think that we are not competent enough to stand here and debate with you? With this point, you, in your mindset, you necessarily think that we are weaker than you. And secondly, you said we should guarantee the right of every people. Have you ever thought about the right of the man? Some men, they are competent enough to take the seats in the legislative bodies, but just because the 50% portion, they do not get a seat. How do you think this is fair? So I don't think why we should give a 50% proportion to the women in the legislative bodies. And secondly, I will move on to my constructive speech. My constructive speech, I have 2 points in my constructive speech. Point number 1, the women. Point number 1, if you give the 50% seat to women in legislative bodies, you are actually positively criminate against women. Positively criminate against women. For example, I am a woman and you give me the seat. Is it out of sheer mercy? Do you think that I am not competent to be voted by the people and get the seat? Do you think I do not have the ability? Do you think I do not have the legislative ability in myself to get the seat? And you are giving me the seat out of sheer pity and mercy. I don't want that. I want to prove myself by my ability. Not this time. And secondly, my second point is concerned with the rights of the man. Firstly, we know that the seats in the legislative bodies are voted by the people according to the competence of men and women. So every people, including men and women. Some men, no, thank you. Some men are very competent. They can actually take the seat and do the job well. But because of the 50% proportion, I suddenly do not get the seat. And how will you think if you are the man? Do you think you guarantee their rights? And secondly, in the status quo around the world, there are far more men than women. Take China for example. There has already been 2 million more men than women, and you give the 50% proportion. You think that men and women should get the same seats in the legislative body? How can you think so? It is even more unfair for the men. So I don't see why we should give the same proportion to men and women based on the unproportional men and total number of men and women. I'll take a point.
Okay. You talked about competitive men don't take the position, but they are not. They take the position not because women are not competitive enough, but because they take a stronger position in the social. It's determined by the social role, not because of their ability. So if women doesn't have this position, they won't have their rights.
Why under the status quo, the seats in the legislative bodies are voted by the people. They are decided by the people. Why should interfere so much in it? Don't you think that the people do not have the distinguishment to vote for the right people? And my second point is concerned with, I think that if the seat is given out with the same number to men and women, it is unconstitutional. According to the Constitution, the seat of the legislative bodies are decided by the votes from the general public. For example, there are doctors and scientists and teachers. These seats are taken by these people from all walks of life. So those who are qualified enough for this seat, then he can take it. This is decided by the qualification instead of the gender. We do not give you the seat just because you are women. We do not give you a seat just because we feel guilty about you do not get the seat. Not this time. So I think our side firmly believes that we should not decide the seat by gender. Instead, we should decided by the qualification and competence. So our side will firmly defend the status quo. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning,
Whoa,
ladies
whoa,
and
whoa,
gentlemen.
Hold on.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, now you can start.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really honored here to defend the rights of my opposite sex. And first, I want to say some rebuttal to this beautiful lady. We talked about the rights of women in the legislative bodies. We talked about it because women took a weaker position in the society, not because their ability, they are not competitive. It's because the social role. Think about it. Most of the officials in the government are men. That's true. That's because of the progress of the society, of human society. It's not about ability. It's about the history. That's formed. That's the
how this society is now.
Not yet.
Not this time. And we want to make sure that human rights between men and women, which is natural existence, can be well preserved. Think about it. If not this time, 70% of the seats in the legislative body were men, you make sure 50% of it is taken by women. Then how can you worry about men not taking other 50%? So we think that is the best we can do to make sure that women have their rights. And now I'll have my constructive part, and it consists of two parts. First, as I mentioned, humans are born equal, no matter what sex you are. And on this base, male and female have equal rights, including legislative rights. Women hold a weaker position in the society. It's not their fault, but that's what government and the law should do to make sure that their rights are not harmed. And for example, nurses, teachers, and also the waitress, women took most part of it. And if only men in other positions, took the legislative part in the government, they just don't present women's rights better. That is not fair for women. And the second opinion is men and women hold different perspectives on many things. That makes a lot of differences. Women and men should all contribute to legislative progress, and women can represent women better than men. That's sure. I can know that very well. That's why my girlfriend called and just complained about my not calling her, not message her. But I had all day just sitting there listening to the classes, and that's just a different perspective for men and women. So only men present women's rights? I don't think so. I'm a man. I don't think I can present all the women here. I don't know why you just don't want to present your rights by yourselves. I don't understand that. And also, women and men's cooperation makes this society works better, because now in the civilized society, in this democracy society, law can make our society work better, make our government work better, make sure that everyone's rights is well protected. And because of the different perspective men and women take, they can make different contributions in the process of making a law. And that is helpful. That can make our life better. That can protect everybody's rights in the most equal way. And that is important. And so now, if I can take any questions. Okay.
You said that men and women should work together, so to make the world a better place, to make an efficient work. Why must it have to be 50%?
Because I told you before, the truth is that now men take much more position in this legislative body. And if you set 50% for women, that doesn't harm men's rights. Okay.
But the proportion of all the population in the world is not 1 versus 1.
That's the truth in China, not the world.
So can you give us some statistics about it?
If you take it in a biological way, that's equal. Men and women are born equal. That's the truth. Okay, so I'll stop talking about it, not now. And also, men and women take different positions in the world, and they serve this society in different ways, and they are not taking the different position because of their ability. They are not competent enough. just because they took the different work, they play the different roles, that doesn't make them weaker in the lawmaking system. That doesn't harm their right to represent themselves in this world. And if we just don't make sure that all their voices could be heard, all their rights could be protected, then there's no way for us to realize the really equality, not only between men and women, but for everyone in this world. And that's not helpful for us to build a better world for us to live. Thank you.
Right, we thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech and invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to take the floor.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable adjudicators, dear debaters and friends. It's a great pleasure to be here to discuss the interesting issue with the government side. And our team strongly believe that the national legislative bodies should not reserve at least 50% of the seats for women. And my speech will be divided into 3 parts. And the first part is the rebuttal part. And I will mainly rebut three points of the government side. And my second part is the constructive speech part, in which I will mainly discuss something about the positive discrimination. And the third part is the benefits of our stance, because we strongly take the stance that national legislative bodies should not reserve at least 50% of the seats for women, and we should and in reality this is the case. So our stance is to defend the status quo. And so the last part will be the benefits of defending the status quo. And at the very last, in the end, I will tell you our conclusion. And first, let's see the rebuttal part. Firstly, the government side has strongly insisted that we should defend the equality of 2 sexes, and I'm very glad and very grateful that you have defended our rights for us, and thank you very much. But actually, I think you are taking a stance. You are unintentionally taking a stance that you are actually discriminating against us positively. And the main clash here is about the equality. And you said that by giving 50% of the seats for women, we can fully represent ourselves. But actually, according to the legislature nowadays, the representatives of the legislative bodies is decided by voting of the public, by people. That is why we have come. That is why this is the case. No, thank you. Well, that is why this is the case nowadays. And everything happens for a reason, and it is a fair play. If we reserve at least 50% of the seats for women, that means you violate to some degree the rights of some men who are competent for the position, and sometimes you cannot find competent women for the 50% of the seats. So that's actually a not very good way. And the second you talked about, no thank you. Second, you talked about the nurses' rights. You said that for example, the nurses are mainly made up of women, and we all by reserving at least 50% of the seats for women, we can fully represent the rights of the women, especially in the field which mainly makes up of women. That's just one side of the story. You have not considered some other industries which mainly made up of men. For example, the mining industry. No, thank you. For example, the mining industry, because in mining industry, most people are men. So how can you decide this? And the third rebuttal is that you said you are constantly talking that you or women possess a weaker position in a society. That is why you want to defend our rights. And we have constantly telling you that we are not weaker than you. We are strong enough. We are strong enough to compete with others and gain our roles in the legislative bodies by ourselves. So thank you for your concern, but we can't do that. No, thank you. I'll come to my constructive speech. And firstly, I would like to tell you something about positive discrimination. By positive discrimination, we mean that in the society there are some minorities and some people who we think they are in the disadvantaged positions, and we want to do something for them, and we will give them some benefits and we'll give them some advantages for them. For example, for senior citizens. In some countries, actually, there is the policy that we will give some senior discount. No, thank you. Let me explain this. We will give the senior citizens some discount for them. Some people see that this is a very good policy because we treat them well, because they're old. But actually, this has stirred a very hatred among the old senior citizens because they think that you do not treat us as equal. Because they do not want this kind of discrimination, although we are taking a positive measures towards them. And that why? Because why this positive discrimination occurs? Because we think that they are not qualified for equal competition. We think that they are in a disadvantaged positions, and that is the same case with your idea, because you think that we are in a weaker position. Yes?
But the right to fight for your own right is not because you're competent enough or not. It's because you're born equal. That's the natural thing. It's not. That's not because determined by the ability of your work, but everybody has the right.
Thank you for your question, but I think we have explained this for at least 2 or 3 times. Yes, we are born equal, and our clash here is equality. We are talking about equality. So every man is born equal, and we have to do this because so we have the equality, the same opportunities to compete to gain our legislative positions in the legislative bodies. So that is why we are doing this by voting, because voting by the public is the most fair play. And let's come back to the positive discrimination. The consequences for individually, we can see that the consequences will, of course, hurt people because our feelings will be hurt. And once the hurt is done, it may take years or forever to take back. And for the government, it will increase the administrative expenditure because we have to allocate a lot of time and money on this part, which is unnecessary because we need equality, we need equal opportunities to compete against each other. And now the benefits. I'll talk about the benefits that ensure real equal competition is good for our social progress as a whole. And if we have equal opportunities, we'll strive for the best, and everyone's good. Based on all the parts mentioned above, have brought our team to the conclusion that national legislative bodies should not reserve at least 50% of the seats for women. Thank you very much.
Right, thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for her speech, and now invite the Member of Government.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to be here. Now, I will still support my teammates' opinion, and my speech will be divided into 2 parts. The first is the rebuttal part, and the second is the reconstruction part. And now, as the opposition team mentioned, I would like to divide it into three. They have mentioned 3 opinions. First, they have said which the given seat for women in the legislative body because they are not confident enough, so they were given the seat to have the right to represent themselves. So I mean, you make a non-sequitur here because they are given the seat not because they are not confident enough. So you mean you are here debate today? because you are not confident enough, so you are given the right. So it's absolutely not. Secondly, the role of women, men and female, they have represent different part of the society. So their right to represent their opinion in some legislative body doesn't depend on their gender. Doesn't depend on the portion of the whole society. It is their role, their social role that makes them there. Also, our opposition team doesn't make any evidence to prove they cannot function their role properly. Thirdly, they mention only those teacher, or maybe master or doctor, they are qualified enough to take part in the legislative body. But so you mean here women can be doctor or teacher or professor? I think this is also a hasty generalization here. So, and our dear team member, you don't have any evidence to prove that women are not qualified enough to be doctor, teacher. So now comes to my reconstruction part. We have 3 points. I will still support my team members' opinion here later. Actually, the equality of women in China has been strived for years, and no matter how difficult it is, be strong about it. Secondly, women's rights should be represented equally in the legislative party, because you know there's NPCC here in Beijing recently, and they are the government official who will come up with the idea to deal with the whole nation's problems. And now, can you imagine that bunch of old men sitting here smoking, and how can they take good care of, or maybe take the women's, for example, discrimination, abortion, or maybe abandon female children into consideration? And also, truly and developed society should guarantee women's rights, because if they can come there, those smoking men cannot think those problems thoroughly. Also, our third point is, it is the government's job to make the women right to represent their opinion in the legislative bodies. So, for example, like the foot fighting, it has been a long history here in China, and also the female kids who has been killing without any sort of reason, just maybe the discrimination that has been exist for so a long time. You see here in China, it seems it is a male-dominant society, so it is the government's responsibility to come up set this kind of rule so that women can represent their rights and express their opinion thoroughly. Although it is a half measure, but if the government keeps forcing, and also it is a standard codes here, but if the government keeps forcing those rules, I think the equality of the women will be represented thoroughly and peacefully. And I think China has used the open policy has been successfully set up in for more than 30 years. At the very beginning, not everybody totally support this new policy, and some people even marching for maybe this policy will not work. But actually, you see, the new China has been worked so hard to enforce this policy, and it works now. You see, now it's totally new China. I'm a student who comes from Shenzhen University later. And you see, 30 years ago, Shenzhen doesn't exist. But now, Shenzhen is a modern developed society, modern developed city in China. You see, it's the open policy that works. So maybe the 50% women who can be taken into the legislative body will not work at the very beginning, but believe it's gonna work in the future like the open policy. Yes.
I perfectly understand how the open policy has actually contributed to China, but I see no relevance about the open policy and what you are mentioning now. I think you are making a false analogy.
Yeah. I think I just want to mention that it is just the I mean those maybe the 50% of the right that women can represent in the legislative body may not work at the very beginning, but it's gonna work in the future.
But good.
Okay.
Time's up. Go on. 1 minute left. 1 minute left. It's not the time to ask questions anymore.
Yeah. So our team are strongly our team strongly believe that the women should have 50% to reserve 50% of the women's seat in the legislative body, and I think it's gonna work in the future. Yes.
Right, good, thank you very much. We now invite the first speaker from closing opposition, the member of opposition.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to say that my following speech is composed of the following 4 dimensions. First of all, is the criteria, and the second is my rebuttal part, and the third is the status quo, which I really want to talk about, and the last is the argument, which is the extension. First of all, let's come to the criteria. Our house firmly believes that the criteria, the main point we would like to focus on this issue is that whether what we're doing is respectful to the human nature. What we are doing here is abides by the human nature. Whether we are doing is in accordance with our human nature. Okay? Now comes to the rebuttal part. First of all, the proposition said emphasize a lot on the equality between the ladies and guys. I want to say that we admit women and men are different. But being different doesn't necessarily mean that they're not unequal. And our side firmly believe that everyone in this world has a certain role to play. That is to say, men and women, they have their certain obligations to fulfill. But this kind of equality doesn't lie in only one area, only one respect. For example, let's take a look at the proposition side. The opening proposition has 2 guys. The closing opposition has 2 girls. Can I say that because the 2 guys in here, the guys are superior to girls, and the 2 girls are in the closing proposition, girls are superior to guys? Definitely not. But we can see altogether, the fields as a whole, they are equal. They are 2 boys and 2 girls. This is what I want to express here, because this is only one field. It doesn't mean that it's not equal. The equality should lie in the society as a whole, in every dimension, in every respect. So, take the society as a whole. If we treat women with their deserved respect and give them their deserved social status, and then why can't you say that women, no, listen please, why can't you say that women and men are not equal? I do not see anything in that point at all. And third, okay, okay, this time please.
Okay, can you see there are 10 seats in the legislative body, and 8 are men, and also there are 10 waiter or waitress, 8 are women, and then you see men and women are equal?
Okay, I don't think you understand my point. The general picture I take here is the society as a whole, but the picture you give me is only a restaurant or hotel. So of course this is not a good analogy. And the second point I want to mention here is that our proposition says mention a lot about the human rights. Okay, how can you say that we granted 50% seats in the legislative system, then we can offer them human rights? Because actually, what if the girls, they do not want to get involved in the legislative system? Because these girls, they do not want to get involved, and you force her to enter this part. Do you think this is human rights? You actually forcing them. This is totally against the human rights. Okay, now this time, please. And the third, our propositions that we mentioned about the girls, the ladies can express their ideas better, the guys can express their ideas better. And how can you say that it is only within the girls' ability to express the girls' opinion? Why can't guys express girls' opinion? This is a kind of discrimination as well. Now this time, please. So this is my okay, and now let's come to the fourth rebuttal. And the propositions I also mentioned about the open policy, the opening policy in China. I want to say that this is a false analogy because the open policy is a success because the open policy has already been very successful, and you wanna use this kind of analogy to the principle here, which we do not see any hints in the future because we do not know whether it can prove or not. Okay, now this time, please. So this is the kind of rebuttal I want to make, and then let's come to the extension part. First of all, I want to put a huge premium on the interest and the choice of our human. Okay, now let's first take a look at the college. What's going on in the college, in the law school? The law school, and there is a very, very clear picture that the proportion of guys is larger than girls. Why is that? Because guys are more interested in law, in politics than girls. Because this is a kind of human nature. We did this, not this time please. We did this because we're interested in this. If you force girls all into the legislative area, this is apparently against the human right. So what is the fundamental reason of this kind of phenomenon? It's not because the law, the legislative system is wrong. It is because of the human nature. The human nature is like this. Therefore, we need to do that. And the second point I want to mention here is that, okay, what kind of people can get into the legislative body? Let's take a look at the whole system. Everyone knows that how this kind of representative is getting elected because we people vote for it. This is our human's willingness. This is our human's will. We want them to get involved. This is a kind of relatively fair system. If we force the 50% of the ladies to get involved in this kind of system, this is against the human's willingness. This is against the law itself. Okay, and the third point, I want to give a final promotion right here. Let's take a look at the overall picture. Let's take a look at the overall picture about the present time and about the future time. And I want to say that as long as the human nature remains the same, not only now it is like this, the future, if our human nature is remaining like this, the future is also what's going on right here. So as long as our human nature remains the same, the phenomena will not get changed. So my partner will give you a lot of elaboration on that. So here's my speech. Thank you.
Right, we thank the member of opposition. Oops, sorry, just testing. And now invite the last speaker on government bench, government witness.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm glad to be here to give the closing speech of our proposition bench. Firstly, I would like to start to give a short review of what the what the debate has going on so far. And our proposition is that the national legislative bodies should reserve at least 50% seats for women. Yeah, and this brought me to say that the theme of our debate it's about rights, human rights, and equality. And yeah, speaking of equality and human rights, I would like to give a rebut to our opposition bench. And they mentioned that what if a female don't want to get in the legislative body and we just force them? What we are talking about is not whether or not they have the quality or whether or not they want to be in the legislative body. It's whether or not they have the right. They have the same right, the equality to get in the legislative body. And this brought me to my summary, to the summary of our proposition bench. We believe that the national legislative body should reserve at least 50% seats for women, because for the following two reasons. Because it is the government's job, and only the government can take action boldly, can take strong action, powerful action to enforce this law, to make equality for the women. And as our proposition bench has stated, and when you look in every world in China, it's most likely that in every party there are more male officials than female officials. It's formed by history. It's because of the long history of China. We have long been in the past, before the forming of New China, we have long been a male-dominated society. Yeah, but that's why we have to make the change. We have to change the status quo. And how are we going to change this? Our opposition side just mentioned that we voted. It's people make their choice. They want more male officials than female officials. It's not like that. It's the government have to make sure all women have the same equality to be voted, and it's only the government can take bold action to ensure the equality for women. So that's why our proposition side strongly believe that, strongly support that the national legislative body should reserve at least 50% of 50% seats for women. Because when you look back, when we check back to like 60 years ago, when before the founding of New China, everywhere in China, and there's not enough equality for women. That's why we have some like my leader have stated, the foot binding. That's totally discrimination against women. Yeah. And ever since the founding of the Republic of China, this 60 years, we have been striving to promote equality for all people, for women and for men, and that's why my leader mentioned. And even though we know it's hard because of the long history of China have formed this kind of male-dominated society, so it's hard. But we must believe that over time, over continuous striving, over hard working, we can change this unreasonable status quo. Because that's why my leader brought up the example of opening policy, of the opening policy in China. That's why she mentioned Shenzhen. Just look at Shenzhen. 25 years ago, it was just a little, it's a village. Nobody in the world knows about China. And when the government decided we should make the opening policy, everyone disagreed. They think it's not going to work. Not this time things. It's not going to work. But they even marched on the street. They even demonstrating that we should not enforce the opening policy. But the fact is that thanks to the government insists that the government took bold action to enforce this law. We believe that no matter how hard it is, over time, this is gonna work because it's right. Yeah, we believe that it's the right thing to do to reserve 50% seats for women. So no matter how hard it's gonna be, we have to. We have to do that. We cannot wait. There's no time to waste. we cannot accept any half measure. We cannot accept any weak solution. We just have to take bold action.
Okay, thank you very much. The last speech is today's debate. I now invite opposition with.
Hello, Speaker. As the only male debater on the opposition side, I feel so pressed that the proposition has seemed to make portraying a male that has no mercy for the women, that did not want any women to get any right to enter any councils. And I think I feel obliged to repair my image. And I want to point out there are several flaws in your speech. First, I would like to point it out that our clash does not lie in whether men or women should be equal. Our clash lies in whether a very particular subject, that is, whether the national legislative bodies should receive at least 50% of the women candidates. And they, for a long time, the proposition side just emphasized that men and women are born to be equal. I have at least heard this statement for 4 times. And I have told you many times that we admit that men and women are born to be equal. But we want to emphasize that this is a completely not the subject, because we are debating whether our clash lies in whether if, as the status quo is that we have so many male genders in the body, but not so many women genders. And our clash lies in whether this kind of situation will violate the women's actual rights in their life. And our answer is certainly not. Because you seem to believe that only men can speak for men and women can speak for women. So you mean, please, after I finish this. I think the opening team of the proposition are actually 2 males, right? But you are debating for the women's rights. I think that if according to your theory, that is completely impossible because you can only represent your own males, right? So why don't you join our opposition side, since you are males and you cannot represent women? So please.
I never said only men can represent men, women can represent women. I said women can represent women better than men do. Alright?
Yes, thank you.
That's clear?
Yes, of course you are making understand that, but so why can you say that? Why can you guarantee that the men that are in this body cannot protect women's rights? You are actually criticizing them for not protecting women's rights, simply because they are men. And I think this logic is faulty. And the second is you have mixed the differences with discrimination. Men and women are born to be different, of course, but otherwise we will have only one sex gender, right? So we see that in the school, the science majors have more boys and the arts majors have more girls. So do you think that is discrimination? Of course not. Because men and women are born to be different, so they actually have the right and the tendency to show differences in their lives. Now, please, after I finish this point. So what you are trying to say is that this legislation, this body has actually more males than females, so you think that they are actually dominating this. But how could this be possible? So this introduces the third question, that is the actual differences, please, after I make the next point. So the actual differences between numbers in the body does not mean that their rights have been violated. Just like as I have explained now, that the men can also speak for women, and the women can also speak for men. And every man and women that has been allowed to enter this body must have been specially trained and tested, and to show they have no sexual discrimination against any gender. And if there are any, there must be very few that cannot be the majority. And now, again, you use open. You also mentioned the open seat policy again. I think the case of the open seat policy just shows that the future is uncertain. You are trying to use a policy that was successful in the past to prove a completely irrelevant policy that is about now to be activated now. That you are going to prove that this irrelevant policy will be successful in the future. I think this does not make any sense. For example, we have activated the Cultural Revolution in the past. So the Cultural Revolution was absolutely failure. So do you think that we should not activate any more policies in the future? Oh yes, please.
So you mean open policies a failure now?
No, I think you missed my point again. I mean that the open policy is certainly successful, but it had nothing to do with the men and women rights. So you are looking at an irrelevant policy that was successful in the past. Of course, we have published so many policies, and we have successful ones, we have failed ones, and you cannot use a certain successful one to prove what you are trying to act in this house is going to be successful. And you also portray the. I feel really sorry for the men who are working in this body because they seem to be portrayed as smokers just sitting there, and while the women are going to protect their rights, the men are just smoking there. And, nothing to do with me. I think you are actually humiliating both men and women because men they can also protect human rights, right? You actually, I said again that you have actually been debating for the human rights. For the women's rights. So why can you guarantee that the men, even if they have 70% in the body that are male, so why can you guarantee that the women's rights are violated? So let's say if you have 60% of women in the body, so can we say that the men's rights are violated? So I think this is you didn't make this clear at all. And also we have also mentioned that we are not doing this out of mercy because we feel that women are weak. We are the current situation at the body is that men overcome women. That is decided by the nature of the women. Because there are not, you have to admit, please. Because you have to admit that there are not so many women who are interested in politics. Most women maybe just stay in their home and be a housewife or to be all else. Of course, if they have the intention to be politicians, we give them the intention. You mentioned that you seem to think that voting is not fair. Because, why? Because there are not same equality to both genders. But why there are not equality? We give the right to vote and to be voted to both males and females. So why do you think that they don't have the right to enter this body? And actually, in this body, we have many females. So I think that you are making this point up. That's the time, sorry. So, in conclusion, we believe that human rights is a basic right, and we also believe that men and women are to born equal. But what we are going to say is that our society did not violate any right of the women. In fact, if you really let the women you deliberately increase their proportion to 50%, you're actually deliberately forcing some of the women inside. And this will actually make the efficiency go down. Because as a natural government, you have to consider the efficiency. There are more men than women simply because there are more men that intended to do this job. And they have interest in it. And for the girls, they just didn't have any intention. And if you force some maybe less qualified girls to enter this body, you may lower down the efficiency of the government. And I think efficiency is very important. And again, you have you have a distorted image of men. That is, we stand there unconcerned about women's rights. That's actually not the truth. Because many of the women's rights are actually raised out by men. So you cannot guarantee that the men cannot protect women's rights, and nor can you say that the men cannot represent women. So if there are even more men in the body, I think it's probably fair for the women, because their rights will also be protected. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Invite everybody across the floor and shake hands.